Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Foreign policy can be complicated, but today President Trump says his North Korea plan and the meeting there is all about attitude.
I think I'm very well prepared. I don't think I have to prepare very much. It's about attitude. It's about willingness to get things done.
A willingness to get things done, which is in contrast to people who don't want to get things done. This is, of course, a classic Trump thing, saying he doesn't need to have the details. For him, it's all about kind of the emotion of the event and the attitude. My next guest, co-author of The Art of the Deal, Tony Schwartz, says the impact of Trump's most common emotional appeal focuses on anger designed to trigger all kinds of emotions, fury, even hatred within people who become his supporters.
Get him out of here. Get out.
I'm angry at our leaders for being so damn stupid.
If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of him, would you? Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Schwartz argues the effect of these kind of appeals to anger is to actually overpower reason. Emotion takes control. He compares it to a person trying to ride an elephant, but you lose control to the more powerful animal. Now, politicians of all stripes have long appealed to emotion.
The kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living. The kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope.
I end tonight where it all began for me. I still believe in a place called hope.
Never been more hopeful about our future. I have never been more hopeful about America. And I ask you to sustain that hope.
Those emotional appeals were from winners. There are others, like Michael Dukakis and John Kerry, who were perceived, at least, as focusing more on competency or their technocratic expertise, and they lost the presidential race. But Trump isn't just rattling people with raw emotion. He's tapping into these deeper feelings and fears, which aren't about choosing between different outcomes, but sometimes eliciting reactions that are even uncontrollable in the people around the country. I'm joined by Tony Schwartz. He's also CEO of the Energy Project and best-selling author of The Way We're Working Isn't Working. Explain what you mean by emotion towards anger.
Well, we have two selves. We have, as you pointed out in your intro, we have the rider, which is the rational self. That's who we think we are. And then we have the elephant, and by the way, this metaphor comes from a guy named Jonathan Haidt at NYU. We have the elephant, which is...
Why don't we have him here?
Good question. Good question. I think you should invite him on. He's brilliant. Then we have the elephant, which actually is dominating our behavior an awful lot of the time. And that elephant is the irrational, the reactive, the fear-driven part of ourselves that is at great odds with who we think we are. And in a world in which a guy like Trump is playing on fear all the time, what he's doing is he's stirring up the elephant. And in his own behavior, he's normalizing the reactivity that we see in the world. So, I was thinking today about that famous book, Hannah Arendt's book, Banality of Evil, about the Eichmann trial. And her point is that the main fear you have is to normalize this kind of behavior. And what happens is our brains, we use our brains or we misuse our brains. We misuse our brains to rationalize the worst behaviors that we are guilty of or that we reactively do.
It seems that you're pinpointing two things. One, the power and primacy of anger, even in a modern society that thinks it may have basically handled some of this. But two, a kind of personal or intellectual vanity, that if we individually or collectively think we're better than this, then we're not going to be as ready to spot it when it happens.
That's absolutely right. We think that we are way more evolved than we actually are. And the ability to step back and watch yourself, particularly watch the activation of your own body when you're feeling a sense of danger or threat, and that anger or that frustration or that fear starts to arise, to be able to watch that. What Trump's providing is an object lesson for everyone in what not to do. What we need to be able to do is actually make that leap to get away from that intellectual vanity, from that hubris. We need to move from hubris to humility.
So let's take that to the other big macro debate, which is what's true and what do you believe? Or does everyone have their own truth or emotional truth? Michael Wolff made a very concise defense of his book that is also highly disturbing if you believe in facts. Take a look.
My evidence is the book. Read the book. If it makes sense to you, if it strikes a chord, if it rings true, it is true.
If it rings true to you, it is true.
I mean, that is a disturbing comment to make. We do act on that assumption. In other words, if something feels right, we assume it is right. And if we don't misuse reason to rationalize after the fact, if we use reason to cut through the emotion, then it becomes our ally. So we need to be able to stand back, to take a deep breath, to feel our feet, and to ask ourselves these reflective questions as opposed to simply descending to the reaction that Trump wants us to, and that he has normalized, and that he has made every day in our lives.
Right, and when you say it that way, it's very important because that's not just about judging other people with whom you might disagree. It's seeing that in the Wolff case, a confirmation bias, something we've talked about before, to prove what you might dislike about him is the other side of the same coin because you're seeking that emotional validation. Tony Schwartz.
As always,
thank you for being here.
It is Friday, the 8th of June of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because, folks, we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. Well, so much news. Some shocking, some extremely sad and shocking, some that makes you shocked and furious, and some that's just not shocking at all, but still offends the senses. That's today's news. Okay, show's over. See you next week. No. Well, apparently the individual mandate, the Department of Justice considers that unconstitutional. Now, let's remember it was the Republicans that came up with the individual mandate so that, the poor people, the losers, would have skin in the game. It was their idea. And that's the fault of Obama, believing that if you gave them what they wanted, they would like it even if it came from a black guy. And they just proved that they hated the black guy. They still hate the black guy. And they hate women too. So yeah, unconstitutional. The individual mandate. Gotta have skin in the game. It was their idea. All right. Thanks. And more of the sabotage. When you're deconstructing the administrative state, you have to adopt some of the long-held plans from the previous group who were unsuccessful in deconstructing the administrative state. And now they've got a team in there that knows how to do it because they got help, outside help. All right. Well, what else? It looks like the FBI. The FBI has been secretly monitoring phone and email of a reporter. A reporter! I don't know. That's a big story, you would think. And in the process, a longtime staffer on the Senate Intel Committee has been indicted and arrested. How dare you talk to reporters? Okay, well, it is true that during the Obama administration, they hated leaks. But I don't know. Back in the day, I mean, apparently, even if you misled the FBI, if you were like a staffer and you misled, oh no, I didn't talk to the reporters. The FBI said, yes, you did. And they say, okay, I'm sorry. You know, they didn't throw the guy in jail or the gal. But, you know, times have changed. I was watching one of those weird America propaganda history channels. And I'd actually seen this British production of the Nuremberg trials before. And one telling segment, just a statement, in which Goebbels, Himmler, Hitler, Speer, all the usual suspects were successful in dismantling German democracy. Now, you don't dismantle something just willy-nilly. You have a plan. Otherwise, it's going to fall down on top of your head. Which it could still do. But, they had a plan. And very similar is what we see here. I mean, yeah, specifics are different, but the progression seems frighteningly similar. Mm-hmm. Well, let's look at what else we have on the menu. There's so much breaking news out there, I just had to put a cap on it, and I had to put a cap on it for the last story today. And we'll get to that, because that's the shocking and sad part, indeed. Well, starting off, of course, that was starting off Ari Melber and Tony Schwartz, the guy that wrote Art of the Deal for Trump, talking about Trump's upcoming North Korea summit, and Trump boasting that it's just all about attitude, not preparation. Mm-hmm. He only went to a military-themed school. All right, you put on the military-themed uniform, and that's all you need. It's attitude. All right, then on the rest of the menu, the superintendent of Yellowstone National Park is forced from his post after disagreeing with the Trump administration over management of the park's famed bison herd. You know what? One of the things that they're upset about? They don't want the Yellowstone National Park, when they cull part of the herd, because, there's only so many that they can keep inside the park, right? They don't want the meat to go to the Indian tribes in the area. No, they're going to eat beef and that's it. Interesting, eh? Devin Nunes is refusing to release transcripts that appear to confirm that key witnesses lied during congressional testimony. Well, of course, because he's a Russian asset. I used to think he was a dupe. I think there's a lot more going on there. And an ex-Congressman with Russia ties may be the missing piece in the Mueller investigation. After the break, we'll move to the chef's table, where some G7 leaders plot to fight back against Trump on trade at the upcoming summit in Canada. And chef and author Anthony Bourdain is found dead in a French hotel room of an apparent suicide at age 61. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice the chat room link at the rightish of the page. Kelly Lincoln, our roaring girl, does take care of that, and she'll get back to you right away if she's not on there when you're on there. If you look at the leftish of the page there from the chat room link, you will notice the contribute donate buttons, and our bills are paid through that, and we are unable to do this without you, so thank you so much for your generosity. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Isn't that nice? Tom takes care of that, and he's quite pithy. And you could go to Facebook. I don't know. I don't necessarily recommend it, but does it matter? Does it matter what platform you're on now? But you could go to Facebook, and I guess I'm supposed to take care of that. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and you can also follow the show, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, at Cookbook West. I'm sorry. I just said they asked for the name, and I said West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and they gave me Cookbook West. All right, thanks. As opposed to Cookbook East, I suppose. Little does the algorithm know. But yeah, okay, follow West Coast Cookbook at Cookbook West on Twitter. And you can get podcasts of the show, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, on Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Alrighty, we better get right into all of this. I have a graduation to go to. I went to a graduation for my niece yesterday. Oh, she graduated from 5th grade. Now she's in, they call it junior high. They start junior high in 6th grade. Some schools do that. Some schools did that when I was a kid. And then other schools went through 9th grade for junior high. I would have hated that. I was lucky. I got to go to a 4-year high school. Yeah, be a true freshman. And then you get to be a senior. And then you get to be a true freshman again. And then you get to be a senior. And then you get to be college boy. It's always some way to keep putting you down for what you know. Or what you think you know. There it is. All right. Well, let's start off with, speaking about what we know. This is a guy who worked 43 years. 43 years as a civil servant. Nah, we're not going to let you retire. We're going to fire your ass because you worked during the Obama years. This is what's so sick. I mean, well, sick. It's just, I think we would probably call it transparent. This is by way of Reuters, and of course, reporting by Laura Zuckerman, and writing by Steve Gorman. All right. Okay, Dan Wenck, who has led one of the nation's most popular national parks since 2011, said that in a broadcast interview on public radio that he and his boss, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, had been at odds over bison, but that he believed they had settled their differences. I thought we were on track, and I thought he was very supportive of what we were doing and how we were doing it, and that we were going to get it done, Wenck told the Mountain West News Bureau without specifying the nature of their disagreement. Conflicts have raged for years over how many bison the park can sustain and methods used to keep the population contained. I don't know. Do they sit on like a little bluff with a buffalo gun? Wild Bill Hickok. Buffalo Bill. Firing from, I don't know, however far away. I don't know. That's one way to do it. I suppose there's other ways. And I know there's a lot of people out there that think that dispatching an animal is terribly wrong. And I can see that. I don't know. Too bad you can't have like these massive ocean-sized herds of bison where, I don't know, people on horseback, say, or not on horseback, work the edges of the herd and, cull a few for warmth and sustenance. The park's practice of capturing and shipping to slaughter a certain number of bison that wander from Yellowstone in winter in search of food in Montana, Zinke's home state, is driven in part by ranchers there who are concerned about competition for rangelands and about the spread of brucellosis disease carried by some bison that can cause cows to miscarry. Yes, if it's not sheep, it's bison. During Wake's tenure, the park has argued Yellowstone can withstand many more bison than the target of 3,000 that is supported by the Montana Department of Livestock and the ranchers it represents. Oh, you can have 3,000. All right. Maybe that's why the llama never took off. Yeah, there used to be a lot of... In fact, there still are. There's llama farms, mostly for, the wool, the hide. But, they were, doing the whole llama... And ostriches! That was another one. There's ostrich farms up here, too. But they never really took off because the beef industry has, a stranglehold. All right. In the interview, however, Wink had said he had been told by the acting chief of the National Park Service that he needed either to accept reassignment to a new post in Washington, D.C., or retire early in August. Well, he had said earlier in the month that he planned to retire in 2019 without alluding to any policy disputes with seniors, and that was in that interview. I feel like I devoted 43 years of my life. I think I have a record of achievement with the National Park Service that at the end of the day doesn't matter, and that I'm no longer wanted at Yellowstone National Park. And that broadcast on Mountain West was aired in Wyoming and many other states, western states. Of course, to me, they're all eastern states, but hey. Even though I told them I was going to retire, Wink continued, that seemed not to make a difference, so extremely disappointed is probably a mild way to explain it. Well, look what they did to McCabe. And Yellowstone, which occupies the northeastern corner of Wyoming and parts of Idaho and Montana, is home to the nation's last large herd of wild, purebred bison. Millions of people flock to the park annually to view the bison and other wildlife and natural wonders. Carolyn Orr from Share Blue Media penned this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Devin Nunes, chairman of the House Intel Committee, is best known for staging stunts to shield Trump from scrutiny in the ongoing Russia investigation, but now Nunes is extending the cover-up to include key witnesses who may have perjured themselves while testifying before the committee. The committee's ranking Democrat, Adam Schiff, called on Nunes 2 weeks ago, to release transcripts from all interviews they conducted related to the Russia investigation, saying they could shed additional light on the issues of collusion and obstruction of justice. Schiff also noted that it appears that some of those witnesses lied to the committee and said Robert Mueller's team should consider whether perjury charges are warranted. But 2 weeks after Schiff wrote the letter, 2 weeks, Nunes requesting that he release transcripts. After 2 weeks, Nunes has failed to even respond to the request. Schiff said he had previously asked Nunes to provide Mueller's team with transcripts pertaining to specific witnesses who may have perjured themselves, but that Nunes would not commit to sharing this material with Mueller. See, it's open and transparent. There's no collusion. We just have to hide things. These people. Well, Schiff also noted that Mueller has told the committee he is interested in scrutinizing the testimony of certain witnesses, but that it will be up to Nunes to decide whether or not to comply with any formal request from Mueller. I wonder if, it seems like Nunes would be under scrutiny, you would think. Well, Schiff didn't say which witnesses Mueller wants to scrutinize. The testimony of Don Jr., Eric Prince, Roger Stone, and others is inconsistent with the public reports of meetings, conversations, and other facts that have now been established, Schiff noted. And if those public reports are accurate, then clearly they were not telling the truth, Schiff added. Indeed, recent reports suggest that John Jr. may have lied to Congress repeatedly when discussing the Trump Tower meeting in 2016 with a Russian lawyer promising dirt on Hillary Clinton, but they talked about adoptions instead, which we all know is, code for, drop the Ukrainian sanctions, get the Magnitsky Act overturned, and we'll talk. And so today, Trump was, he's going to the G7, and he wants Russia to be part of the G8 now. Well, it may be the G6 before it's over. Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is by Cody Fenwick out of Alternate, and he says that he thinks it's pretty important that Senate investigators, they think it's pretty important that they interview Curt Weldon, an ex-Congressman with deep Russian ties. Oh yeah, Curt Weldon, remember that guy? Well, he may be the key to unraveling the extensive connections between Trump's associates and Russia, according to a new report in The Atlantic. Weldon served as a Republican representative in Pennsylvania in 2006, when his campaign was mired in controversy when his daughter's house was subjected to an FBI raid in the weeks before Election Day. Though no charges were ever brought in the investigation, Weldon alleges the government betrayed him, but reports suggested that agents were scrutinizing his ties to Russia-linked businesses. And he was also a vocal Trump supporter in 2016. Now, Natasha Bertrand from The Atlantic reported that Senate investigators are seeking to interview Weldon as part of their probe into potential collusion between Trump campaign and Russia efforts to influence the 2016 election. And a spokeswoman for Dianne Feinstein says Weldon has suspicious connections to both Russia and the Trump campaign that senators would like to, investigate. Well, Weldon had knowledge of a private meeting between Trump's fixer Michael Cohen, an ex-Ukrainian official and business partner of Trump before the inauguration, to discuss a peace plan between Russia and the Ukraine. When that meeting was revealed in the press, Weldon was reportedly furious that the plan fell through because he was going to make a bunch of bucks. You don't get to be an oligarch unless you make a bunch of bucks. He also reportedly said that funding had already been obtained for the peace plan from Viktor Vekselberg, and Vekselberg is a Russian oligarch with ties to the company Columbus Nova, which was recently revealed to have given Cohen more than $500,000 via a shady shell company shortly after Trump's election. It's not clear what all these connections add up to, but if the Senate Intelligence Committee has its way, it will find out. Hear that, Devin Nunes? All right, let's get to our break. We'll come back and go check out weather from around the world, and we'll finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, a Solo story in the Star Wars canon. As far as standalone Star Wars stories go, the Ron Howard-directed Solo is no Rogue One. While that picture succeeded both as a standalone and as part of the multi-layered legend of the Star Wars universe, Solo feels more than a tad lacking on both. That doesn't mean that it's a bad movie. Indeed, Solo is at its heart a fun film that portrays the life of Han Solo before he became a smuggler. In an odd parallel to his future father-in-law, Darth Vader, the young Han grows up at the bottom of the social heap and under the control of a giant bug-like creature while harboring dreams of being a pilot. He also has a love interest, Kira, played by Game of Thrones' Emilia Clarke. She's no queen here, rather just someone else trying to get by. Without either of them knowing it contemporaneously, of course, she'll ultimately set Han towards his destiny. The other characters which help with this include a freelance smuggler/thief by the name of Beckett, played by a scene-stealing Woody Harrelson, and his tough-as-nails partner Val, played by Thaddeus Newton, who gives a much-needed female presence to this smuggler's boys' club. In addition to these new characters, there are also some familiar faces like Chewbacca and Lando Calrissian, played by Danny Glover, and who manages to play the role with the same suave charisma as his predecessor, Billy D. Williams. Despite this, Solo still manages to feel slightly removed from the Star Wars canon. Add to this the addition of an unexpected character from one of the earlier movies, and you might be wondering if the timeline here is even possible. Ultimately, Solo feels like a reach into the pocketbooks of fans without adding much to the legend. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Men inherit their Y chromosomes from their fathers, and they get an almost exact copy, other than a few mutations, meaning very little changes about the Y chromosome from generation to generation.
You may just have 100 people with the same Y chromosome because they are all descended from one man.
Marcus Feldman, a population geneticist at Stanford.
They all had this great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, and every male relative of that individual, who's a first-degree relative, has the same Y chromosome.
Researchers have thus used Y chromosome data, along with mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down only by our mothers, to investigate aspects of ancient populations. For example, one recent study found a huge drop in Y chromosome diversity 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. At the same time, mitochondrial DNA diversity continued to grow, implying a possible crash in the male population, with 17 women to every man. But
it seemed to us that the 17-to-1 sex ratio was just too extreme to be real.
So Feldman and his team used computational models to investigate other ideas, and they found that bloody fights between genetically homogeneous clans could have produced the same results.
Essentially, we're saying that the clans that are fighting one another are built around having the same Y chromosome.
Imagine a single deadly battle, knocking out a whole clan of men with the same Y chromosomes. Then repeat that unpleasant scenario a few times. You'd get a huge drop in the diversity of Y chromosomes as the victorious clans won battles and expanded. The details are in the journal Nature Communications. Eventually, Y chromosome diversity bounced back as smaller clan structures were replaced by large, genetically diverse cities and societies. A cultural innovation that we too inherited. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. At the outset of the Civil War, public opinion in the North was generally unfavorable to immediate abolition. Some favored the status quo, others favored gradual emancipation. Those demanding complete and immediate abolishment of slavery, called abolitionists, were a minority. Others, content with outlawing slavery in the territories and newly admitted states, would leave it in place in the South. These were known as Free Soilers after a political party that advocated this solution to the slavery issue. As the Civil War proceeded, policy toward slavery became part of the North's war strategy. Not long after the outbreak of war, Congress passed the Confiscation Act of 1861 that forbade the Union military from returning slaves to slaveholders. In July 1862, it passed a second such act, emancipating all slaves owned by rebel slaveholders that came under Union jurisdiction. By then, Lincoln was secretly devising a two-part executive order, the Emancipation Proclamation, that would attack the Confederacy by liberating its slaves, although none in Union territory. That's all for today's podcast. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Thursday, June 7th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. A major world survey has found that attacks on labor rights, violence against trade unionists, and threats to democratic activity have dramatically increased over the past year. The survey, called the Global Rights Index, is conducted annually by the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC represents national trade union centers such as the Ghana Trades Union Congress. The 2018 Global Rights Index reports on activities in 142 countries using internationally recognized indicators to assess how workers' rights are being protected or not in law and in practice. I talked to Sharon Burrow about the Global Rights Index. Ms. Burrow is the General Secretary of the ITUC. I asked her first about the index finding that the space for democratic activity in countries has been diminishing.
When freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly is denied, then workers themselves are at risk both of physical violence and indeed arrests. And in the worst of the countries, of course, we're still seeing they shoot trade unions. But there's no doubt that when more than 54 countries in the world have seen an increase in constraint around democratic space in these terms, then it's not just our activists who are at risk, it's actually democracy itself. So this is particularly an indicator of the increase in authoritarianism, in dictatorship, and of course the social unrest that leads to conflict, with more than 50 countries now experiencing some form of conflict. So this is not a future on which we can build human and labour rights, where freedom of association, freedom of action is actually respected. Of course, part of this is also about the right to strike, and the increase in violence against trade unions, the increase in arrests and detention is part of that, and that's increased dramatically as well.
The Global Rights Index lists the worst countries for workers' rights. What are some of these countries, and how have they been violating the rights of working people?
Well, this is not a list that any country should want to be on, but Algeria, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Colombia, Egypt, Guatemala, Kazakhstan, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia and Turkey all make up the top 10 worst countries for workers in the world. And again, that comes back to denial of freedom of association, so the right to join a union, denial of the right to strike. In fact, 87% of countries have violated the right to strike, and 81% of countries deny some or all workers' collective bargaining. Clearly, in those worst 10 countries, these things are absolutely at risk. If you take Turkey, you've seen the rise of dictatorship with a man at the helm, the President Erdogan, who's prepared to purge his opposition and simply arrest people on suspicion that they might be part of that with no due process, no trial. In the Philippines, we've seen human rights abuses right through to the point where people are shot, often with the concurrence of the president himself, who believes that's an appropriate attack on those he perceives to be involved in the drug trade. In Egypt, we've seen again our independent union simply without the freedom to act, the freedom to actually associate and organise and bargain, and that's particularly disturbing. But right across the board, what we're seeing here is the results of increasing dictatorship, authoritarianism, and tragically shrinking democracy itself.
Has violence against trade unionists been increasing over the past year?
There's no doubt about that. When you look at the increase in arrests, in violence, in denial of the right to strike, these things simply add up to a world that is not safe for activists, but a world that workers who are incredibly brave are prepared to fight for fundamental rights for themselves, for each other, for their children.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The goal of the X Prize is to use sponsorship money and a prize system to address market failures and spur innovation in key areas, from oil cleanup to creating water from thin air. Not all X Prizes are claimed, but on Wednesday, one of them was, the Anu and Naveen Jain Women's Safety X Prize. The $1 million challenge was to build a device that triggered an inconspicuous emergency alert if a woman is threatened or attacked, and it has to work if a woman's cell phone is snatched.
People want a solution that should be independent of the smartphone and should have an audio and other stuff recording features.
That's Avinash Bansal, the operations director for Leaf Wearables, the Indian team that won the X Prize. Their device, called the Safer Pro, is a small chip that can be installed into a smartwatch or onto less noticeable pieces of jewelry. When an alert is triggered, a message and location details are sent to pre-selected guardians over Bluetooth or through a mesh network of other devices. And to boot, explains Neymarika Rajiv, an advisor to the winning team, their product is affordable at less than $40.
This product works as well as in developing countries as it would in a country like America. It is something that at a price point which is, absolutely workable for everyone.
A new Gallup poll released on Thursday asked people in 142 countries how safe they felt walking alone at night, and the results show the importance of women's safety devices. While more than 90% of those in Singapore or Norway felt safe walking alone, those numbers plummeted in Argentina and Mexico at 40%, or in Brazil and South Africa at 31%, and that includes answers from men. Leaf Wearables co-founder Manik Mehta.
If my device is with one person, and that person gets saved, it helps me sleep better.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us to the chef's table here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. Indeed. All right, let's begin with weather from around the world, and we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 50 degrees and a little dry right now, but we are slated for quite a bit of rain here in the next couple of days. We will be mostly sunny for the day with a high of around 81 to 82. Right now the winds are out of the southwest, a negligible 1 mile per hour. Will be picking up in a few hours. shifting out of the west-northwest at 10 to 20 miles per hour, continuing that tonight at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Oh, 10 to 20 miles per hour today, a little windy. Then tonight, 10 to 15 miles per hour, where we will get about a quarter inch of rain tonight, and then thunderstorm activity tomorrow, where scattered thunderstorms with heavy rain, and expected to get about a third of an inch of rain on that little dropping. Of course, I won't be here. I'll be up north in the state capital, celebrating my grandson's high school graduation, and then he in a few days, I believe at the end of the week, he then jets off to Germany for the bulk of the summer. Good for him. All right. So right now, grass pollen is still very high. Air quality index is good at 15, though that has ticked up a few notches. Daytime UV is still very high on the index. It is at 9, so do take care. And high pressure still dominates, 30.03 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 75%. Though that will be rising real soon. Indeed. Alrighty. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is registering 71 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 76 and partly cloudy. Rome is 78 and fair, though they are under a heavy rain advisory that could knock out critical infrastructure like streets. Kiev is 81 and fair. Kabul is 82 and fair, but with heavy winds. So now's the time to have a wedding party and parade, because it's hard to fly those drones in that heavy wind. Hong Kong is 77 degrees with rain. Tokyo is 76 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 with rain. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and sunny, and they continue to have a small craft advisory with heavy winds on the bay and offshore. Continuing. This has gone on for quite a while. But New York is 71 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. Springtime still exists in the Big Apple. And we're getting towards summer now, aren't we? It feels great. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and they planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. First story here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of Reuters with David Lundgren, Roberta Rampton, Giselda Vagnoni, and William Mallard reporting. Leaders of the group of 7 nations headed for a summit in Canada on Thursday, more divided than at any time in the group's 42-year history, as U.S. President. We hardly ever say that P word here at Netroots Radio. It is really forbidden, according to the style manual, as we make it up as we go along. Donald Trump. Yes, his America First policies risk causing a global trade war and deep diplomatic schisms. Yeah, that's exactly what they want. Not they, meaning the G7, but us. We. United States of, America. In a bid to rebuild America's industry, Trump has imposed hefty tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, including those from key G7 allies like Canada, Japan, and the EU. He has threatened to use national security laws to do the same for foreign car imports and has walked back on environmental agreements and an international deal to prevent Iran from building a nuke. All right, Macron, who is invested in a warm personal relationship with Trump, said that the other G7 nations should remain polite and productive, but warned that no leader is forever, a sign that Europe would not surrender meekly to the U.S. president. Maybe the American president doesn't care about being isolated today, but we don't mind being six if need be. Because these six represent values, represent an economic market, and more than anything, represent a real force at the international level today. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau predicted robust discussions on trade, but other G7 members like Japan and Italy seemed less likely to want to challenge the U.S. president because, well, Japan's right there in the way of North Korean nukes. Fancy that. Now, Trump will come face-to-face at the gathering in Charlevoix, Quebec, with world leaders whose views do not chime with his on a range of issues like everything it means to be a human being. I'm sorry, that was in this reporter's opinion, but it needed to be stated. Yep. Trump signaled that he was in no mood to compromise as he met Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and who has tried to cultivate a friendly relationship with the American president because Japan's right in the way of all those North Korean nukes. We're not talking about keeping them from building nukes. We're talking about the ones they already have. All right. Well, he wants to go there and cause trouble. And I don't think the world is, ready for it. And, well, they should not.
Danser maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Dansez maintenant et jetez vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent.
All right, this last offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because, folks, we really, truly are all-night hawks in the diner of life. This is penned by Brent Lang and Shirley Halperin out of Variety. We honor a great chef, Anthony Bourdain, not just a celebrity. I chose Variety because they come at it from a celebrity angle, which I take a little exception to. Everybody wants to know what a chef's signature dish is. A chef, their signature dish is everything or whatever it is they're cooking at the moment. Okay, let's be clear. Okay, so when they make Variety makes a comment he had no culinary creations anointed with his name. Well, you don't become executive chef at the Brasserie Les Halles without having some chops. Let's be clear. Anthony Bourdain, the television personality and writer who shot to fame with his culinary-driven globetrotting, has died of an apparent suicide. He was 61. CNN, for which Bourdain hosted the popular Parts Unknown, food-focused travel series, confirmed the news. It is with extraordinary sadness we can confirm the death of our friend and colleague, Anthony Bourdain, the network said in a statement. His love of great adventure, new friends, fine food and drink, and the remarkable stories of the world made him a unique storyteller. His talents never cease to amaze us, and we will miss him very much. Our thoughts and prayers are with his daughter and family at this incredibly difficult time. Bourdain was in France working on an upcoming episode of his CNN series. His friend, French chef Eric Ripert, found him unresponsive in his hotel room on Friday morning. His death comes days after fashion designer Kate Spade hanged herself in an apparent suicide. They've updated this particular article here for Variety, but other articles I've come across describe his suicide as by hanging. Bourdain was better known for his writing and television work than he was for his culinary creations. Well, that is true. After toiling for years in kitchens around Manhattan and as executive chef at Brasserie Les Halles, Bourdain hit the big time with the 2000 publication of Kitchen Confidential, Adventures in the Culinary Underbelly. The bestseller was hailed by critics for its witty, energetically written look behind the scenes of the restaurant industry, and the book had expanded on a 1999 New Yorker article. So then he parlayed that success with various television extravaganzas. I wouldn't call them extravaganzas, but he was able to meld sociology, anthropology, travel log, music, pop culture, and great food and drink. And another thing, Bourdain ate all food. It wasn't just at, the finest restaurants by the finest chefs. It was also street cart food, the family meal. When traveling around the world, the best way to figure out a culture is really not at the high-end restaurant, though it's nice, but truly eating the family meal. In 2013, Peabody Award judges honored Bourdain in parts unknown for expanding our palates and horizons in equal measure. Often outspoken with a sharp-elbowed point of view, Bourdain was a critic of sexual harassment in the restaurant industry. He was unafraid to call out chefs who didn't care for such as Paula Deen and Guy Fieri, but he was also effusive in his praise for those he felt were magicians in the kitchen, promoting the likes of Jose Andres and Thomas Keller. I have to say I had the great honor of working right next door to the French Laundry when I was chefing at Sally Gordon's place in Yountville. His blunt style applied to his personal foibles and failings in his writing and interviews, and on a show, Bourdain spoke openly of his heroin use, financial difficulties as a struggling chef, and relationship heartaches. Bourdain said he struggled with celebrity and noted there was a downside to international exposure his show gave dive bars and hole-in-the-wall eateries. If I name the place, I've changed it, Bourdain said in a 2017 interview. The next time I go back, there's tourists, and everybody says I ruined it for them. Bourdain was born in New York City and raised by Pierre Bourdain, a record executive, and Gladys Bourdain, an editor for the New York Times. He was married and divorced twice, first to high school sweetheart Nancy Pukowski, to whom he was married from 1985 to 2005, and later to Octavia Buzia from 2007 to 2016. Bourdain and Buzia had a daughter, Ariana, who was born in 2007. A very sad passing. And let's say a little prayer if you do that for Anthony. The pain was too great. And journey well, my friend. All right. We'll see you all next week. Stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day and the weekend. We'll have breaking news as it breaks in. We'll have some modified programming through the weekend as I'm out of town. So we'll keep broadcasting, and you'll be amazed and entertained and informed as it was meant to be. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio, and we will visit with you on Monday in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.